I know you don't.
Speaking of Clef, we have an article here that's from Dr. Clef, which was called Assessment, which was almost entirely from the perspective of the GOC.
Yes.
And I'm not going to run down a summary of what happens in the article. It's a pretty good article. I recommend reading it. But I did want to read out some of the dialogue between a assessment.
Hardest working man in containment fiction. God dang.
Of the GOC, because
I wrote an article about dragon snails, and I wrote an article about Law Foundation today. It was a good day.
So first of all, they start off with going on about how the Foundation employs like D class, and so if we find ourselves, in a situation where we are facing up against the Foundation and they've, utilized D class, we don't have to worry about it. We're in a good situation to figure out how this anomaly works, take it and get out of there, or kill it or whatever. But it says, and then there's this conversation. If we run into an MTF, we let them take the para threat. We shadow them, we log the capture, try to gather as much information, but we don't get close.
Yep.
I'm looking at these recommended videos on the side because I'm so bored, and it looks like there's one about, I never really got into the exploring series, so, maybe I'll take the opportunity here to, look at that shit and comment on it, but I did watch some Mr. Bob. I did watch some Mr. Bob. On the other hand, the coalition's official stance to the Foundation as a rogue and I don't know what to say about it.
No official
I just don't.
By the council, and especially no invitation to join the coalition itself.
Yes, and part of that is because of that D-class thing, because it's a violation of human rights.
Something like Mr. Bob is literally
if they send D-class,
taxidermy of containment fiction. You're literally taking everything about containment fiction out, putting it over there, and then what you're left with is just a classical way to tell a story, which is why they get millions of views, by the way. You see how that works when you capitulate to more basally centered, limbic system seated ways of telling a story? You get more upvotes and views and shit. So there's going to be a certain number of people, and the wiki will always trend in this direction because more people are going to be led by that basal attitude than they will be anything higher in the form of cognitive functioning, frontal lobe shit. So the wiki's going to trend that way over time. You basically have a mosh pit of upvote procurement.
Come across an investigation by the Foundation that was being run by a D-class. We just gonna get them out of that situation.
Yeah.
Because what are they gonna do? Fight us?
Recording?
No, they want us to take them.
Yes.
Yeah, they're in jail, but it's kills you jail. They don't want to be there. They'll be happy to leave their terrible job.
A fairly recent article by Yossi Posse and Dr. Shoulder, who is a new. I think they have a fairly heavy presence in the dank memes from Site 19.
Not
subreddit.
A good start.
But I
not a good start, Dr. Shoulder.
I thought it was pretty good.
You're working with a chip on your shoulder, buddy.
And essentially, there's a lot to this article, but the parts that I thought were really relevant to this conversation was this focus on the GOC.
Yossi Posse, I can't say
this anomaly that
I can't say I think they're a good author.
Inscription.
I think Sacrosanct is one of the most boring, overrated articles on the wiki.
Functions. So dead, effectively.
It's just so formulaic and
says that since its creation and containment in 2023, the SCP has successfully.
Maybe the pacing is the only good thing about it. It's all pacing.
Entities.
It's all it is.
Right.
It's bad,
and
especially at the end when the thing starts talking. I'll tell you why I don't like Sacrosanct. The reason I don't like Sacrosanct is the reason why I got into SCP, which is that I was so tired of the complete, trite, formulaic, cookie-cutter style of doing Hollywood movies, scary movies. They're all the same. They all tangle themselves unskillfully into a position that they can't get out of. It's like watching somebody who has like a second worth of short-term memory capability try to play Twister, that game where the people don't even know where they put their foot down last, and so they just blindly move, and then they get pretzeled. That's exactly what happens with every Hollywood movie. They get pretzeled because what happens is they have to build up this supernatural monster, and the way they make it scary is they make it They make it just super duper powerful and like unstoppable, and it's like 682 or something. And then then they finally get to a point in the movie where they're kind of like, you can almost see them at the writing table going like, well, I mean, we gotta like end the movie somehow. Like they gotta overcome the guy somehow, And then some other guy over here is like, they could hug it. And then the other people are like, what the fuck did you just say? And who the fuck are you? And then he's like, yeah, you just hugged the monster, and that's all it wanted, and so that's how you win. Or you splash it with some water. So that's kind of like what happens with Sacrosanct too, because it's like this, like the whole thing is just suspense. It's like a new age, it's like a very modern composition of strings where it just mimics an alarm. Who's that composer who wrote that Threnody for the Hiroshima victims? Look it up. It's like that. That's what Sacrosanct starts out like. It's like this just barbershop, tone of just thematic tension. Pacing is good. And then you get to the top of it, and it's just kind of like, oh, you're like, it talks, and it like, it like has a mythos that it like talks about, and and then it kind of just goes back down.
Omniscient means all-seeing.
Right. So this is like implying
there's a word for like
this anomaly has been
there's omniscient,
to like destroy
omnipotent,
like gods, right?
There's a couple other
in terms of
omni.
Yes,
But my favorite is, I have to look it up.
It would also be killing anybody the GOC
not omnifarious.
That's
not it.
Knowing or seeing everything. And
Omnificent.
Like
that's it.
Omnificent
is unlimited in creative power. Fuck. Omnificent. This is why I love words. You got people like Rounderhouse who will like think that a love for words and capable, fluent use of them is masturbatory upon the hard cover of a thesaurus, but gosh,
anomaly is
what
the
a shame.
Focus of a significant conflict with the GOC, such that they've lost.
But then again, by the way, that is a element of Rounderhouse's writing. It's the DJ Cactus school of thought, which does tie into Neo Law Foundation. But basically, it's let's make this as simple as possible, simple language, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with simple language. But we would just expect Rounderhouse to not have a very large vocabulary because he might have one, he just doesn't show it. Because it's all about just making it as palatable as possible. If you think of like vocabulary terms as like flavors, like cuisine flavors, like culinary flavors, the DJ Cactus Rounderhouse et al. School of thought is the equivalent of just dumping a bunch of garlic and butter on everything and then just sprinkling some parsley on top. I used to work at J. Alexander's. You guys know that. I think it's Redlands now. But I used to be a server, right? And I would carry out the plates, and every plate that you carried out from the kitchen would pass by the general manager or the floor manager, and he would be examining the plates, making sure they look good. And every plate that came by, just a little bit of parsley on top. That little green flake. There's actually no flavor in the parsley flakes. There's no flavor there. This isn't real parsley. But, it looks good to the eyes. One time, I was holding a stack of onion rings, like this high on a plate, just wondering how I was going to not drop them. And he looks at me, he says, you know what? I can soak any dish in butter and garlic, and these idiots will eat it up. And I said, huh. But that always stuck with me, and I think that's what's happening here. You basically just, it's almost like you just swallow the other flavors in a bunch of butter and garlic, and the people don't even know that they're just tasting garlic and butter all over and over again, just different textures underneath.
1,000 personnel trying to find it.
Yes, and they just keep throwing themselves at it. Somebody in the comments calls it just the GOC chuck.
It's like taking the nuance of a coffee bean mix and just dumping it full of sugar and creme brulee flavored cream. That's all you're gonna taste all over and again.
And then
that's all it is.
What I thought was really interesting was the Conprocs are like really complicated, and sometimes when you see that, I kind of groan. But and by that I mean
Conproc should be simple in one sentence so you can get to the narrative.
Special containment procedures, which are just
hey, never mind using the conprocs as a substitute for a narrative. Never mind that.
Procedures for which
motherfucking idiots.
But sometimes they're used in like really effective ways. Like here,
God, it just makes too much sense. These people are trying their hardest to just
like contingency plans.
Turn the genre into something that it isn't. In the name of new frontiers in which to mine upvotes.
All attempts are to be made to neutralize the
so sad.
To prevent the organization from
they don't realize that restraint within the restraint. That's where you find the real creativity, my man.
Not be killed by this thing. We want
and
to destroy it.
Meaning our entire, or at least part of the entire point of containing this is to make sure we keep fucking with the GOC.
Has it been 30 minutes yet?
It's a really good article.
Especially for these guys.
I think that is Dr. Shoulder's first article.
20.
I mean, Yazzie Posse helped as well, but
omniscient, I think, means all-knowing as opposed.
Oh, he finally caught up. He certainly had to look that one up, didn't he?
But yeah,
I think that's what they mean, though.
It's a fascinating. I just meant I was correcting myself when I said it.
Oh, sure.
Well,
I thought that was interesting because, like,
I had to look mine up though, didn't I?
And it could be implying
omnificent. Look at that one. Oh, what a sexy word.
To mean that the GOC literally has godlike beings working for it. I thought it was more like psychics, you know?
Yeah, I think they've probably got remote viewers who are tripping over this thing.
Right. That's what I was thinking, was like remote viewers, like people that like can focus in on an idea or a concept and see, quote,
omnipresent. That's another one.
Distance of, miles and miles.
I would imagine there's probably a lot of people who are getting free semesters off at all those wizard colleges that the GOC works at because their roommate at the dorm in the wizard college died because they remote viewed this SCP.
Right.
Yeah, so here's a question about this SCP they're talking about. And I've talked over him a little bit, but it's basically this like kill agent that's meant to kill deities, like omniscient deities, and the fact that they're omniscient by definition logically means that they would know about this, and because they know about this, they die, because it's a kill meme switch. But if they know everything, wouldn't they know to not think about that?
It's really sad to learn remote viewing. I'm sure not a lot of people survive according to this one.
Like, I just like the idea that, like, first of all, the article like proposes the existence of remote viewing without saying it.
Yep.
And then that this anomaly has
I'll give him this. I do love articles that just like dump a ton of like subtle assumptions, in the span of like a few paragraphs, and you're just like, wow, like what? That means this.
Designed for this purpose, but is
love that.
Utilized for the purpose
fuck with people's heads.
Killing anyone that comes looking for it.
Yes, it simultaneously goes, there's a widespread thing you didn't know about, but don't worry, we've taken... Which is kind of like SCP-1000 in a sense.
Yes.
Guess what? There used to be something.
Right.
Not anymore.
And then, before we go, and that implies this is going to be quick, and it's not because there's 3 articles, but I want to
we still got like an hour and a half.
Oh, yeah.
Third Law is a...
I thought this computer died today. I was so sad.
As far as I understand, it was created by a few people.
Next man up. Like I said, I'm surrounded by laptops right now. I think they got closer.
Chaucera? I could be saying that wrong.
And a random day.
And a random day.
Ooh,
right.
let's not talk about Chaucera. No.
It's like fascinating, and it like has a pretty significant focus on the GOC and the Foundation in terms of global like geopolitics.
Yes, Third Law is excellent.
Yeah, it's really good, and I regret that
wonder if it has something to do with
I
Newton.
really haven't read much about it, except for this first one we're going to talk about, which
equal
is
and opposite reactions.
I didn't even know it was part of Third Law. Which is SCP-3457, or in my notes, The Right of Solomon, or So You Want to Be a God, eh? In the comments, it's pretty clear that some people have like a problem with this article, and it's fair.
A lot of people at the SCP Wiki are very interested in apotheosis. That's really what meta stuff is about, like pataphysics that makes the author God. I mean, it's the same thing, just approached from 2 different angles. I mean, the destination's the same spot.
Because it implies that the concept of God is like a man-made thing. Not just the concept.
I can't believe that this is like
the existence, the
novel
actual
thing
existence of a god
to think about.
is a man-made thing. So this rite of Solomon.
Maybe I'm just jaded, you know. Like I've already thought these things. Not that they're like deep, but just I'm older than these people. So like, what they think is unique and novel is like okay.
So what that means is magic will be completely redefined by doing this right.
Definitely true that there's a age discrepancy when it comes to tastes with myself and most of the community here. But once again, that's the point. That's one of the points of me doing this.
It's making a god, and not just a god, but the god of magic. And maybe the god of magic is, as they imply, Yahweh. I mean, it doesn't quite say that, but it says that we think the first people that performed this was a
could that be
group
offensive?
Of,
See, religious
ancient,
religious individuals
Israeli,
don't have enough, I guess, cultural oppression to be, considered.
Like, okay, so you're saying that Yahweh was literally someone you set up.
Wow, I think that probably someone is very offended by that.
It's a right
I'm just saying, not that I care. I don't
deity
care. I'll offend anybody. I don't give a shit about that.
A concept that's tied back
I'm just
to
saying from
Gnosticism.
y'all's
Basically, the
setup
demiurge
here.
is an entity that created the physical world. So, like God. And this entity, once set up in the place, is capable of enacting like extensive control over the nature of magic as a whole, and then controlling it. So you set up someone to be the god, and then through the rite, you actually like put a.
This will be the second to last one. There's another one.
The god. And this ritual is like super old, and people have tried to work it before and have completely failed, leading to like the death of the people that tried to do the ritual up until 1881, because prior to that, they think the existing demiurge would stop it from working and kill the ritual workings, the people that were actually trying to do it. But in that year, somehow, we're not sure how, the existing demiurge was killed by a group of German occultists during the like 6th occult world war or whatever.
Here's another cheap move that's happening here. It's like, okay, so these things are like gods, demigods and stuff, and like, I'm not saying that you can't kill God, you know what I'm saying, but like, is it really God if you can kill it? I guess that's exactly what I'm saying. I don't know.
The death of the demiurge, which is terrifying and hilarious at the same time, which is what a lot of third law stuff does.
And it's also like a really interesting like callback to the origins of the GOC, because the GOC originally was inspired by a creepypasta about some government, I can't remember, figuring out how to assault and then kill God.
Right.
In my yawn, I just read the description for this YouTube video, and it says, "Today we are joined again by the indomitable Harry Blank." Does this guy show up again? Is this like the second, and it's just being released first or something? I don't think he was on the first 2 episodes. Is he going to be on another one? Please no.
You have to know how the ritual.
Is that what that means?
Works. And the GOC knows what objects are needed and how those objects can either be controlled.
Anytime you make a podcast and you want to make it about a discussion on your inspirations for your own work, don't do it.
And the Foundation, which this article is from the perspective of, they only know the.
This could have been an hour.
Right. And so they have this joint operation launched by the Foundation and the Allied Occult Initiative, which is essentially what the GOC was prior to World War II, with the goal of preventing
normal pour, by the way,
completion
1.5 ounces
of this ritual, because there were some Nazis who wanted to try and make it work during World War II.
Yeah.
And it's
really serious about Jack Daniel's honey. I don't know.
It's not that common on the SCP.
Call me a sweetie.
Most of the time there's
call me milk and cherries, but I love that sugary honey.
But this article
whiskey
ends with like an agreement, like essentially like an international agreement called the Colne Agreement, to keep the GOC honest by auditing and identifying people who know about the ritual within major occult organizations.
It's only going to happen when I finish this damn podcast.
Because the Foundation doesn't want to make sure that, or wants to make sure that no one in the world actually knows how this ritual works.
Yeah.
Which feeds into third law, because that Colne Agreement is the basis for an entire understanding of like the.
This is so boring. I'm so sorry. Just like,
perspective.
I mean, go listen to Config Colin, right? There's
the
not a dull moment. If I do
on
say so myself, this is just so boring.
They work together, and also how magic works, which is part of the extreme appeal that it has as a canon.
Yeah, because it's like weirdly grounded while also being entirely about magic.
That's what I love about it, because it's grounded. You look at Third Law, and
Oh
if
my
you've
God.
read enough of it, you can go, this is grounded. But it's not grounded because it takes what other people do in a complex fashion,
Listen to
and it
this.
does it simply. It does not. It's not grounded because it deals with less crazy stuff. It's not grounded because it deals with smaller scale stuff. It has more crazy
Let me listen
stuff.
to this and I'll tell
It
you
has
what's
a
going on
bigger
here.
Scale. The reason that it's grounded is it has a detailed approach to the insanity. It goes, how does magic work? What are the rules behind the magic?
Wow.
How does this insanity function?
So what they're impressed with is really the entire premise of containment fiction that has been lost, and they are rediscovering it again in a different way, a route they've never gone apparently. So basically, they're impressed with the Third Law canon because it's grounded and deals with things like magic. So the interesting concoction here, the interesting mixology, is that basically you have an incredibly thorough, detailed, hugging asymptotically as close as possible to realism and immersion as possible of a subject that is a black hole, magic, that you cannot possibly approach rationally. And so you have this dissonance, this tension, out of which Third Law comes, where you try to get as close as possible in your rigorous, grounded fashion to what is essentially ungrounded, and that is entirely fascinating. Well, that is really what containment fiction was supposed to be, and it's no coincidence that these individuals cannot understand the how Series 1-esque style of writing is actually a store of value and is just as valuable as it was, 10 years ago when it was first written, and that they're impressed with something like this at the same time. They have to see it in miniature again, because the larger realization of the context has just so inundated their what they take for granted in their conceptual landscape that that by the time they recognize it again, it's like fascinating to them. The analogy I would give is if you ask a fish where water is, they won't know, because it's just sort of like baked into their existential background radiation. And that's really what's happened at SCP. What they've just described is the whole point. It's what makes containment fiction, and it's what makes it different, is that you take this subject matter that has been approached since time immemorial, and you do it with the paradigm and the modalities and the methodologies and the rigor and the intellectual technology that is unique to our time, right? Which is like the scientific things, the semblance of remaining highly rigorously scientific, which is where those metrics that you guys, those measurements that you poo-pooed earlier in the show come from. So it's just strange that they have to discover it again. It's like taking the same food and putting food coloring on it, and these people think it's a new dish that's fascinating. It's just interesting to see.
And what effects does it have? What is the feedback loop of magic? If you cast a spell, where does the rest of that energy go? And it actually has rules for explaining it.
Yeah, you
it
treat it like physics. That's what he's trying to say.
What's happening and why. And
you try to apply a physics to what is impossible to describe in physical terms.
A wizard did.
And that's what containment fiction is.
Because basically, Third Law puts in the extra
and the more you stray away from that rigorous, grounded approach in your general approach in philosophy to containment fiction, the less you're doing containment fiction. Okay, so that's been about 30 minutes of their guys' time, about 50 minutes of my time. So that's pretty good. Appreciate it, guys. And I think we'll finish this next go around, and I can finally smoke this. Peace.